So the next line says, the supreme conduct is to be in disharmony with the world. That, of course, Israel knows all about. But it doesn't, of course, mean that. It doesn't mean that we are fighting with our neighbors and in a disagreement with everyone around us as far as, you know, fighting and arguing and so forth are concerned. What it means is that we are inner state, our inner aspirations and values are not in harmony with that of society. Never was this more relevant than in our present day around the world, where, as we know, society, the media, industries, the government, everything are telling us that consumerism, getting more and more and more, buying more and more and more, hoarding more and more, is good for us, and that the more we get, the happier we will be, and that basically we have to look out for number one, i.e. that is for ourselves, and promote ourselves, and go all out to see that we do very well in this world. Doing well means getting lots of money, bigger houses, more cars, and going up and up and up in the economic world. And that the more we get, the happier and the more satisfied we will feel. And this is something which is very, what's the word? Insidious. You understand the word insidious? Insidious. It's something which it's like a poison, really. It slowly permeates, while seeming like a good thing. It undercuts all genuine values, and so it looks like good, but actually it leads to not good. So in this way, it's called insidious because it's not open, something underlying, which creates problems. So here we can see it, as we mentioned yesterday. I mean, in the more affluent societies often have the more mental problems. I mean, the level of depression nowadays in the affluent countries is just rising exponentially. Why? I mean, it's not the poor people. You know, yes, the poor people feel deprived and therefore they get depressed. It's not that. It's often the affluent who outwardly have everything, more than everything, who end up being seriously, medically depressed. So, I mean, really, in the more affluent countries, you know, so many people are on antidepressant drugs. I mean, it's just amazing. And yet, you know, outwardly they you know, they've never had it so good. Even if you go like to Beijing and you look in the imperial palace of the emperor of China, he lived in such simple quarters compared with what most ordinary people are living in nowadays. And certainly they didn't have plumbing. I mean, you know, his standard of living, despite all the silks, was much more uncomfortable than the average person nowadays. So outwardly, we have never had it so good. And yet inwardly, people have probably never been so troubled. So in itself, I mean, this is why nowadays many psychologists and sociologists, anthropologists, neuroscientists, etc., are studying the whole question of happiness, because they can see that the idea of merely having more and more and more does not just automatically lead to a sense of inner contentment, and especially a sense of inner meaning. So many people now are faced with the fact that their life has no purpose beyond, you know, scrambling to get more and more and more. So when it says that the highest conduct is to be in disharmony with the world, it means that we are working towards something which is not in accord with the way that the world is telling us we should be going. For example, there is the praise of giving, the praise of ethical conduct, the praise of having patience, instead of, when somebody annoys us, just retaliating immediately and getting our own back. We learn patience and so forth. And nowadays, as we all know, you know, the idea of multitasking is so presented as the ideal. The more things we can do at the same time, the better it is. And heaven help that you stop for 1 second just to be quiet and breathe. And of course, the Buddha Dharma says, you know, everything that you do, just give it your total concentration. Stop trying to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. You'll only go crazy. And nowadays, neuroscientists and psychologists and sociologists are saying the same thing. Multitasking is driving people nuts. And not only is it driving people crazy, you know, they just have breakdowns and get totally stressed, but it's also very inefficient. Because, you know, our brain is not wired to multitask like this. And so it ends up with work being very superficial, and also lots of mistakes. So this idea of being in disharmony with the world is very important, because in the Buddha's Eightfold Path, in the Four Noble Truths, he said that ordinary samsaric existence, because of the poisons of the mind, is inherently unsatisfactory. It's dis-ease, right? It's everything would be all right if only. But there's always an if only. Something is always wrong. Or when everything comes together for a moment, then there's the fear that it's all going to fall apart again, because everything is impermanent. So there's always this inner dis-ease going on. And so the Buddha said, ascribe this to our inherent ignorance of our basic identity, along with the attachment, the clinging, the grasping onto things, wanting things to be permanent, wanting things to be there, wanting people to be there, who are by nature changing moment to moment to moment. So this gives us a sense of insecurity, because we can't hold something, and we're trying desperately to hold on to something which cannot be held. But then the Buddha said, yeah, never mind, you know, inherently it's okay. You know, really and truly we're healthy. this sickness can be cured. And then he gave the cure, which was the Eightfold Path, which includes ethics and mental cultivation and so forth. But the first one is right views, right understanding. Right at the beginning of the Eightfold Path, before anything else, is that we understand things properly. We have the right attitude, the right aims, the right view of what is important, what is not important. Because what we consider important in this life is where we will put our attention and our energies. So therefore it's very important right from the start that we ask ourselves, what is really meaningful in my life? What meaning does my life have for me? What is my purpose here? Because once we set our target, our aim, our idea of what life is, what value life has for us, then we will follow that. Do you understand? I mean, if you think that what is important in life is, getting financial stability, getting a nice house, getting a bigger car, or your idea of the main value of life is having relationships and family and so on. None of these are bad, understand. I'm not saying this is bad or good. I'm just saying that what we put at the center of our life as the most meaningful thing for our life is where we will put our energies and our attention and our interest. So right at the start, we should ask ourselves, what is really meaningful for us? Where do we want our life to go, so that at the end of life, we can look back and say, that was a meaningful life. I didn't waste it. I benefited myself. I benefited others. I was reading an article by this woman who used to work with people who were terminally ill for many years. And she asked them a series of questions. But the question I remember was, what do you regret most in your life? Because now they're facing death. I mean, we are all on one level terminally ill because we're all going to die. But once you recognize that, then you begin to see what is important, what is not important, right? When you're about to drop it all. And so she asked them, what do you regret most? And she said, on the whole, almost everyone said that they gave importance to what was not important, and they ignored that which really matters. And basically what they were saying was that they had given, I think especially the men, but maybe nowadays women also, they gave too much attention to acquiring outer things, bigger houses, more cars and so forth, and to their career, making advances in their career. And what they ignored, which was so important, was their family. I mean, many people know the problem of working so hard to get money in order to educate your children and to see that, your family is secure and lacks nothing. But at the end, what they do lack is you, because you're working so hard that you have no energy left over for your family. So many children say dad was a distant figure. He'd come home at night, and mum maybe nowadays completely worn out. They get in takeaway food, turn on the television, and that's it. So many children basically grow up not even knowing their family. I don't know, in Israel maybe it's different. Maybe you still have a closeness in the family. But in many European and American families, this is one of the big problems, is that the children no longer really know their parents, because everybody's working so hard to keep going and to outwardly give them everything so they never lack. But what they do lack is that sense of attention and love from their family. The time, it's now called quality time, because there's no quantity anymore, So this is a big tragedy. Children need to have their parents there. It's not important so much what the parents give them. What the children want is the parents to give themselves. So many people regretted that they had not spent more time and energy with their family, because they were working so hard to provide for their family. They also regretted that they didn't give more time to their spiritual life, and that they didn't give more time to social outreach, that they didn't do more to help others. And these were the things that they regretted. Nobody regretted that they didn't make it to be CEO of their company. I mean, they don't care about that when you're going to die. All you care about is the quality of your life. What did you do with your life after all? How much did you really inwardly benefit yourself? How much did you really benefit those others around you? So this is what we have to think about when we're talking about being in disharmony with the world. What really matters in our life, that if we were to die, if we all knew we might definitely die next month, we don't know. Nobody knows it. That has nothing to do with age or health. People die all the time. So if we were going to die within a week or 2 or 3, and we knew that, what would matter for us? What would really be important? So that we don't get caught up in all the things which are not so important. Yes, we have to work. Yes, we have to have some security. Yes, yes, yes. But if that is the center of our lives, then we are going to end up feeling very, very dissatisfied at some point and wonder, what's this all about? We get on the treadmill, we become like those rodents on a wheel, endlessly scrambling, but getting nowhere. Exhausted, eventually they fall off. But they haven't gotten anywhere. So this question of being in disharmony with the world means in disharmony with the world's values. What really matters? And that. So nobody can tell you what your value should be. Each of us has to answer that question for ourselves. But if we regard ourselves as practitioners, then we definitely need to put the Dharma in the center of our lives and not just at the periphery when we have a bit of extra time. That means that our values become Dharma values, much more concerned with how we are living our life in a way which is in conformity with the Dharma. Cultivating kindness, cultivating patience, cultivating generosity and ethics, and using our daily life as our practice. Not something which we just do when we're sitting on our cushion, when we go to a Dharma center, when we go for talks, then we all suddenly become very spiritual. Every day, with our family, in our workplace, pursuing our extracurricular interests. Everything should be our Dharma practice, so that the Dharma permeates our life. In that case, we will live in disharmony with the world, while appearing to be more harmonious than the world almost deserves. Because we will be cultivating with our family, with our colleagues, with our friends, with everybody, the good heart. Basically, we are not, well, some of you might be, but most of us are not 8th level bodhisattvas. So we have to accept that. But what we can do is to act like a good, genuine human being. Which means, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama is always saying, to cultivate the good heart. That much we can all do. Maybe we understand emptiness, maybe we'll never understand emptiness. Maybe we see the nature of the mind, maybe we never see the nature of the mind. Doesn't matter. What matters is that we become better people. If we can't become more kind, more patient, more understanding, more open-minded, then what? And the other day when we were in Jerusalem, we met this Arab guard, and he spoke to a friend and said, well, what are they? And she said, well, they're Buddhists. And he said, Buddhism? What are they against? It sums up this country. But when he was told that as far as she knew, Buddhists weren't against anybody, he ran back up the street to ask us if there was something he could read on this. He probably had never heard of a religion which didn't base themselves on who they were against. So the thing is, we become a little friend of all the world. Right? We're a friend of all the world. We don't have anybody against. This much we can do. This much we can do. All of us. And this takes us out of harmony with, we're going in the opposite direction. We're not in conformity. If you don't like the word harmony, we're not in conformity with the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world bases itself on who it's aligned with and who it's opposed to. But this is not the point. We recognize our common humanity with all the humans on this planet. We are all the same. We want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And so we open our heart to everybody, without exceptions. And this takes us right out of being, going the way that the rest of the world is going. This is what it means, that our value system is very different. We're more interested in, as it says in the Bible, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So, we are more interested in giving than receiving. When we die, we're going to give it all up anyway. The only thing we take with us is our karma. So this is what it means. It means that, really each one of us has to sit down and ask ourselves, we have this very precious human life. It's a very well endowed human life. You are all highly educated. You have the freedom to think what you want, to believe what you want. This, even today in this world, even today in this country, is rare. And especially for women. You know, you have freedom which much of the world could not even dream of. So the point is not to waste it in things which in the end will not give the satisfaction that we hope they're going to give. And to really put something worthwhile at the center of our lives. And from that, everything else will follow. Everything else falls into place. We become better people, we become better partners to each other, we become better parents, we become better children for our parents, we become better colleagues at our work, we become better citizens of this country. In all ways, it's a gain-gain situation. I mean, it's not a matter of, giving everything up and going and living up on a mountain. That's not what it means. The question we have to ask ourselves with possessions is, do we possess the possessions or do the possessions possess us? This is the question. It's not the things themselves, it's our attitude to things themselves that's the problem. And so, therefore, we have to set our values. You have this very precious human life. Don't waste it. This is what it's saying. Do something worthwhile with it. So that at the time of death, and who knows when death will come, we can die without regrets. Thinking, well, I did something. I made some journey. Isn't that? So this idea of living in disharmony with the world means inwardly our values are very different. And our belief in what will really bring happiness for ourselves and for others, and a genuine sense of inner contentment is very important. Because, as I say, our view, what we think is important, what we think is not important, and how our attitude towards everything influences not only what we think, but also what we say and what we do. So therefore, we have to get our sights clear. Because then we will find that everything begins to fall into place along with where we are thinking we need to go. Many people feel very confused in their lives, and it's because they haven't really sat down and really thought about what is important, what is not. And the thing is that actually, in many ways, we have to decide to make choices. We have to discriminate what is important for us, what is not important. And no one can do that for us. Each one of us has to make that inner decision for ourselves. But once our sights are more clear, then somehow it begins to all come together. Whatever our choices might be. So, therefore, he says, stay out of harmony with the world, because the world is going in one direction. Now, I mean, this was in the 10th century. Imagine what he'd say now. And we can see very clearly which way the world is going. And so, if we want to go that way, we are free, we can go. But if we think maybe that is going to be a dead end, then we have to choose another way. So then the supreme accomplishment is the continuous decrease of disturbing emotions. The word accomplishment, this is where I was very grateful for the Tibetan, because accomplishment in English is a kind of vague term. And when I read the English at first, I thought, what were they translating as accomplishment? So when the Tibetan uses the word nguru, which the Sanskrit is siddhi. And so then it all came into view. That's what he's saying. In the 10th and 11th century, which was around the time of Milarepa and many of the great Mahasiddhas, those who had many siddhis, as today in present India also, a sign of one's accomplishment, which really impressed people, was being able to fly, walk on water, have many magical, seeming magical accomplishments, right? You know, if you could fly, then you had siddhi. Oh, he has many siddhis, people say, meaning has many clairvoyant powers. And so the word siddhi, mudu, means really accomplished in Tibetan. Has the idea of all these magical powers, which, you know, like even today, you know, lamas leave their handprints and their footprints in rocks, for example. And even today you can see rocks not only which are left by lamas today, but also 1,000 years ago. You know, Gotsangpa came by in Lahul and he put his handprint and other prints in the rock, and you can still see it today. So these are siddhi, right? That, you know, and of course Milarepa was always flying all over the place, and many of his students likewise. And so that was his siddhi, right? And so in those days especially, a sign of your accomplishment, your meditation accomplishment, was being able to manifest all these magical acts. Which, incidentally, the Buddha said you should not show. In the Pali Canon, there is, it's actually in the Vinaya that you're not allowed to demonstrate your siddhi. In the Pali Canon, in the Vinaya, there is an account of, in some village, there was a big pole, slippery pole, and at the top was like a bowl with something in it, I don't know. And so anybody who could climb up the pole and get it got the prize. And so a monk was walking by who knew how to levitate. And he thought, well, for the glory of the Buddha Dharma, I will do this. So he levitated up and took what was in the bowl and brought it down. And everyone was terribly impressed. But when the Buddha heard about it, he was very upset. And he said, absolutely, you must never show your accomplishments in this way, in public, for such a thing. Because people then think that accomplishments means you're spiritual. You see, we'll deal with this. Anyway, he made a rule in the Vinaya, you're not allowed to show your clairvoyant accomplishments unless it's really for some really important thing. The problem is that merely because you are clairvoyant, or even because you can fly, doesn't mean that you are spiritually evolved. Some people, I mean, like in New York, you know, there are so many shops advertising psychics, right? So, I mean, people who are born with a certain amount of clairvoyance, but I have known some people who are highly psychic, but they themselves were a complete mess. It didn't mean that they were in any way spiritually evolved. And so we mistake that. We get terribly impressed by somebody who can manifest, you know, gold bracelets from their hands, and we assume that that means that they are spiritually highly advanced. And if it's not trickery, it might just be that they have these particular siddhi. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're realized, or that they are better people as a result. They might have huge egos because they are different, special. So therefore, because the pursuit of siddhis is a sidetrack, some very highly advanced masters have many siddhis, which they usually never show, but they have them. Other very highly advanced masters have no siddhis. Doesn't matter. Some totally crazy people have many siddhis. Some completely crazy people have no siddhis. Right? I mean, the point, what I'm saying is that having siddhis is no particular indication of your actual spiritual insights, and it detracts from the real thing, because people get very impressed. If you can do all these wonderful things, then they assume you're a master. So therefore, this is why Atisha is so clever. At that time, when having siddhis was the big thing that many people were trying for, he says the supreme siddhi is the continuous decrease of our disturbing emotions. That's the real sign that we're getting somewhere. Right? Nothing to do with walking on water or flying in the air. It has, is our greed, is our anger, is our jealousy, and our ignorance getting less or getting more? That's a sign that we are really accomplishing something. Another place, Atisha says that if one goes in for a retreat, a meditation retreat, the question to ask at the end is not, you know, what extraordinary experiences we had, what great realizations we think we had. Have our disturbing emotions, our afflictive emotions, grown more? Are we more irritable, more proud, more greedy? Or have they stayed the same with just much of a muchness? Or have they decreased? If we are less angry and irritable, if we are less greedy, if we are, you know, more easily patient, more easily understanding, thinking less of ourselves, really concerned more with the happiness of others, then that retreat was worthwhile. Otherwise, it was a waste of time, he says. So he is always concerned with our mind, as the Buddha was, you know, looking at the poisons of our mind and how to dilute and finally completely clear the poisons of the mind. That's a sign that we're getting somewhere. When we are naturally less angry and irritable, when we are naturally, we feel when someone annoys us or upsets us, instead of feeling annoyed and upset, we naturally feel compassion and patience. When we feel less greedy, less grasping, when we are able to love without needing to always hold tight and possess, when we're not always thinking of me, but much more concerned with the well-being of others. When someone gets something which we would really have liked to have, and we are so happy for them, instead of being jealous and envious and resentful, and so forth. When our minds are more and more filled with positive feelings, more and more spontaneously, naturally, in a situation where previously we would have been upset and angry, now we feel, open-minded and not upset, patient, compassionate, happy. Then we can think, yeah, something's working here. I mean, this is very important. It's really, sometimes it all gets very abstract. But it's really very, very practical. Forget about self and no self. Just get ourselves together. We can keep the ultimate view, but in the end, are we nicer people? This is the question. I mean, I always think when your family say, you're much nicer nowadays, what you doing? Then you can think maybe something's working. But if they find you more uptight, more judgmental, more irritable, then that's not going right. So what Atisha here is saying is that we really, to know if we are really, something really is working for us, is when our negative emotions begin to subside. When we are less judgmental, when we are less uptight, when we are less irritable, when our minds are really beginning to open up to include all beings in a nice, natural way, then we can think, yeah, something, it's beginning to work. This is very, very important. And Atisha comes back to it again and again. It's why I like him. Well, one of the reasons. Because he was very practical. He doesn't say, the supreme accomplishment is, becoming a 10th level bodhisattva. Or, having extraordinary powers and so forth. He says, just that our negative emotions, all our greed and our anger and our irritability and our judgmental mind and our narrowness begins to decrease. He doesn't even say that it all goes. He just says it decreases, gets less. All right, we still get upset, we still get irritable, we still get judgmental, but less. At least less, not more. Because, religious can get very self-righteous, as we all know. And so, not that. But softer. Softer. As our heart begins to become more soft, more flexible, more gentle, then we can think, yeah, this is working. This is a good thing. And we can only test it with other people. This is the important thing. You see, when you're sitting, if you're in retreat or if you're in a group and you're all keeping silent, I hope. Everybody keeping nicely silent. Yes, very important, very important. So, then you're in a nice little Dharma group or you're in a retreat. Then everybody's smiling, everybody friendly, and you think, oh, what a nice person I am. It's so easy. But it's very easy, as we always say, it's very easy to be loving to the lovable. And so when everybody is harmoniously staying together and, practicing nicely together, then it's very easy to think, oh, look, this is easy. I'm basically such a nice, friendly, patient sort of person. And that's nice. It's good. Obviously better to be harmonious than disharmonious, except with the rest of the world. But where the real testing comes is when we go out, back to our homes, back to our workplace, back to our neighborhood. That is really where we practice. We rev up a bit during times of retreat or times of teaching, but real practice takes place in our daily life. And therefore, when people are annoying for us, we really should be grateful. We're going to deal with this in patience, but really, because this shows us how we're doing. Otherwise, we can't tell. If we are always kept in an incubator, we don't know how it is. We need to be out with other people in order to really understand, first of all, where we are really at in our journey, and also to use that as a means of cultivating these qualities, so that the world is not in opposition to us, it is our helper on the path. So it's very important to have that contact with with everybody around us, in order for us to say, have our afflictive emotions decreased or not? If we do get uptight, if we do get very judgmental, if we do get holier than thou at any time, then we can see it, because we're observing the mind, right? So when we observe our mind, if we see that there's still a lot of irritation and anger and judgmental views in it, then this is good. We can see that, and then we can work to find the antidote and transform it. This is what the path is about. Sometimes, especially people who are into Tibetan Buddhism, or everybody's Zen and Vipassana, it's all the same. They have this idea that practice means sitting down on your cushion and doing your specific practice. And then the rest of the day is so much worldly activity. And so people are always saying, I have no time to practice. But that is really a misunderstanding, because practice is not just when we're sitting on our cushions. The paramitas take up the whole, even the Noble Eightfold Path also, it includes all of life. Meditation is only a part of it. There are many other qualities needed, including generosity and ethics, patience, loving kindness, compassion, many qualities needed on the path. So we shouldn't overemphasize just one and make that synonymous with Buddhism. Buddhism equals meditation. Cultivating the mind is a very important aspect, but it's not the whole aspect, or at least sitting on the cushion isn't the only way that we're going to cultivate the mind. If we think that doing formal practice is practice and the rest of our day is so much worldly activity, then nothing will ever change. So we have to take all this advice and put it into our daily life. Everything that he's saying, we have to keep there and use it. so that our daily life becomes our practice. Then something will change inside. But if we only think that, when we're sitting doing formal practice or when we come for teachings, that is Dharma practice, the rest of the time is just any old time, then nothing is going to change. So all these teachings, even though sometimes it may seem a little abstract and a little philosophical, is actually very practical. Even the teaching on no self. Because if we keep it at the back of our mind, that all the time we are identifying with something which is very impermanent and fleeting, and that if we really, even though we put the self at the center of our universe, if we search for that self, we would not find it. Even if we just have that idea in our mind, it changes things. It begins to shake the foundations a bit. Even if the whole edifice of the ego doesn't come tumbling down, something is being undermined just by thinking about it and considering, I wonder if that's true. So all of these qualities are needed for us to sincerely walk the path. The path is our life, moment to moment to moment. It's not outside of our life. The path is right inside us. It's not something outward. So everything that Palden Atisha is saying here is meant to be integrated. And our families, our colleagues, our friends, all these people are helping us. Each one of them is our teacher. What can we learn from this person? So we'll just do the next one because it comes along with it. The sign of accomplishment, the sign of siddhis, again, is a continuous decrease of our wishes and wants. Just see what it says. So the Buddha said that the cause of our suffering is our attachment and our desires, meaning here negative, greedy desires. It doesn't, people say, well, can't we desire? Desire, enlightenment, desire happiness for others, desire, peace in the world. It doesn't mean that desire. That's a different desire, a different word, actually. Here, this desire, it means a greedy desire. Lust and longing and attachment. And what it is talking about is our ability, it's not, as I said, the things themselves and people themselves, they are innocent. They are not the problem. The problem is our greed and grasping mind. That's the problem. So, there is that story of, which illustrates what we're talking about, of the king in ancient India who was a very religious king. And of course he had a big palace filled with beautiful things and all the luxury goods of those days. But nonetheless, he was a very spiritual king, and he had a guru. And his guru was like the modern day sadhus. He owned nothing. All he had was a wooden bowl in which he ate his food. And one day the king and his guru were out in the garden, and the guru was teaching the king. And meanwhile, the servants came running from the palace and said, "Your Majesty, quickly, Maharaj, come, come, the whole palace is on flames." And the king said, "Don't disturb me. I'm learning Dharma with my guru. You go and deal with the flames." And then the guru jumped up and said, "What do you mean? I left my bowl in the palace." This is the point, right? We can have almost nothing and grasp at it. We can have everything and we are non-attached. So the question is not what we own, but how much it owns us, right? So it's greed and grasping, wishes and wants. The question is always, what is, again, at the center of our desires? Are they Dharma desires, or are they just worldly desires? Worldly desires in themselves are not good or bad. It's not that we're saying that you all have to give everything up and go off and live in a cave, even though usually they do say that. But even in Tibet, which was probably in its day the most religious country in the world, and always, usually texts start by saying, right, you have to leave everything behind and go off. Very few people actually did. And many, many people attained very high realizations and accomplishments staying just where they were. But, it was traditional to suggest that you leave everything. But the point is, it's not a matter of physically leaving everything. I mean, some people are called to physically leave everything. Most people are not. But it's the inner relinquishment which is what counts. So that even if, like the king, you have everything, inwardly there is no attachment to it. Whereas even if we have very, very little, if we are really holding on to it, then we are caught. So again, people are always thinking detachment sounds very cold. But it doesn't mean that we don't care. But it means that we are not... Somebody said it's like if you're holding, like if you're holding a butterfly. If you hold a butterfly, you have to hold the butterfly very gently. If you go like that, beautiful butterfly, no butterfly. Right? So that's the point, that we hold something gently and cherish it. But as soon as we try to grasp it, somehow it kills the spirit. And we suffer. We suffer because we try to hold on to something which by its very nature is impermanent. This is why we suffer. We don't suffer because we love. We suffer because we cannot. In loving, we want to own it. This is a very important, this whole idea of attachment. We don't even own ourselves. How can we think we own others? When I was 18, I became a Buddhist. And then, because in those days, which was the very, very early 60s, just before the hippie period, there were very, very, very few lamas in the West. And there was almost complete ignorance about Tibetan Buddhism. Nothing there. and no books, no centers, no anything. So I wanted, therefore, to go where the lamas now were, which, of course, in 59, so many lamas left Tibet in the wake of the Chinese invasion, and so they had settled in India and Nepal. So I wanted to go to work at the school for young incarnate lamas, which had been set up. And so I got a letter from the person running that school saying, oh yes, please come. So I was so excited, and I ran through the streets to my mother, who was coming from work. And there was only myself at home, my mother and I. My father had died when I was a child, and my brother was in the Royal Air Force, and he was in Singapore. So there was only my mother and I at home. And my mother and I got on very, very well together. She also was very interested in Buddhism. When I became interested, she became interested. And so I ran through the streets to my mother and I said, oh, I'm going to India. And she said, oh, yes, dear. And when are you leaving? She didn't say, oh, you're going to India, how can you leave me? Your old mother, all alone. She didn't say that. She said, oh, when are you leaving? And then while I was in India, for a time she came to India and stayed about a year with me. She loved India, but the food was very difficult. She had to go back. But every 10 years, she would say, if I send you a return ticket, will you come back for 1 month and see me? So every 10 years I would go back and see my mother. And she told friends of mine that she always prayed that in her next lifetime she would again come back as my mother, because she was concerned that otherwise I would have parents who didn't understand I needed to lead a special sort of life. Now that's love. Of course she would have much preferred if I had settled down right beside her. But that wasn't what I needed to do, and she loved me so that she could let me go, to lead my own life. And for a long time she sent a little money every month also so that I could stay there. So that's the difference between love and attachment. Love says, attachment says, I love you, therefore I want you to make me happy. Love says, I love you, therefore I want you to be happy. If that includes me, wonderful. If it doesn't, anyway, I want you to be happy because I love you. So that also includes not only people but things. You know, we can use things, but we don't need to be owned by those things. So our wishes and wants, we suddenly realize also the joys of contentment. That we already have so much. Why do we keep needing more? This question of greed and grasping, attachment, is something, you know, people always ask, how do I overcome anger? But the real problem is, which they don't ask, is how can I overcome attachment and greed? Because we think that attachment is the source of our happiness and security. And we don't understand that it's the cause of our dukkha, of our suffering. Not love. Love is very important. But this grasping mind, that causes a lot of pain because we always are afraid of loss. When you have gain, you have loss. So therefore, this is something which really we have to look in our hearts and really practice how to love without clinging. And to recognize that we do not actually own others. Each one of us has our own karma. So, this question of letting go. If there is any mantra in Buddhism, really it's not a mani padme hum. It's let go, let go, let go. Om let go, hum pe. Om let go, hum pe. Om let go, hum pe. This is release. Release our grasping onto ourselves, release our grasping onto others, and hold gently. Buddhism is about liberation, about release. Liberation from what? Release from what? From grasping. You know, there is this story, I don't know if it's real or not, but they say that in Indonesia there is this monkey trap, which is a coconut. And inside the coconut, on the shell of the coconut is a little hole. Inside is this sweet coconut mixed up, like a sweet. And so the monkeys smell that. They come, they put their hand through the hole, they grasp onto the sweet, and now they've got a fist holding, so it can't get out. Right? And then the hunters come, and all the monkey has to do is let go, and he can get out. But he can't let go. He wants to escape. Yes, he's terrified. But he also wants to have the sweet. Right? And this is such a very good analogy for our situation. Yeah, of course we want to be released, but we want the sweet as well. And we can't let go. So it's an inner letting go. Letting go of our self-preoccupation, letting go of our need to grasp at and hold on to others as if we owned them. Letting go of all our endless wishes and wants. Such a freedom. The problem for wishing and wanting is that it, as the Buddha said, greed is like salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. It's never ending. We think that if we get the perfect relationship, the perfect house, the perfect car, then we will feel satisfied. All our problems will be resolved. But as we all know, that is not true. First of all, we have a relationship, then we have to sustain the relationship. We have a car, and then it has engine problems. And then if we, even when we get to a point where we do have, for the moment, our desires satisfied, tomorrow we will have new desires because the neighbor has an even better car and a better model of our iPad and so forth. It never finishes. I mean, our staff at the nunnery, our Tibetan girls, every week they seem to have the latest update of some these appliances. And I mean, they're living in India. So always there is more and more and more. And it's never ending. So while there is nothing wrong with getting, a better car or this or that, and it's certainly having relationships and so on and so forth, that is not the problem. The problem is our attitude towards that, expecting that that is going to solve our problems. But the problem doesn't lie in another person or things outside of ourselves. The problem lies within ourselves, with our own inherent distorted attitude. That's the problem. So whether we have everything like the king or nothing like the guru is not the point. The point is our mental attitude to what we have. For example, we get in a relationship hoping, expecting, poor soul, that that person is going to solve all our own psychological lack. I mean, God help. If you're not complete in yourself, you can't expect someone to complete you. It's unrealistic and unkind. We should meet together as balanced, complete human beings. Then we can have a deep relationship with another. But if we're expecting another to somehow, complete us, then it is unrealistic. And then, of course, comes all the romantic stuff, of meeting Prince Charming. Poor Prince. In some ways, I mean, both sides are not so good, but at least in traditional Indian and Asian custom, your partner is chosen by your family. So then they try to find someone who is most suitable, but also you come with very few expectations. And therefore, if they manage to be basically okay sort of people, then you're grateful. And then you build up on that. Whereas if you come with very high, romanticized expectations that you've found the ideal person in all the universe, then you're starting with very unrealistic, romantic, technicolor expectations. And then, of course, after the honeymoon, you go down, 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 down. And, if somewhere along the line you can actually meet together as humans with all your faults and your hang-ups, then you become friends. But if not, if one has just projected all one's desires onto this other poor innocent person, then it won't work. So to come to even have a relationship because of one's own inner neediness seems to me a recipe for disaster, because that is not the reason we should have a relationship with another human being. We have to deal with our own inner neediness first, so that we don't come just, filled with all these unsatisfied projections, but are very realistic, and come together with somebody, romance, but also companionship and an appreciation of the other, and it becomes a mutual instead of being based on our needs and greeds. So in everything that we do, if our desires and our discontent and our dissatisfaction begins to decrease, we become more and more inwardly satisfied, more and more content, more and more appreciative of what we already have. Then we feel this inner sense of balance and well-being. And otherwise we are just endlessly, running, round in circles, never getting anywhere. Towards humans, to other humans, towards animals, towards possessions. We have to look at our own neediness. Where does it come from? How can it be resolved? Not just by getting more and more. That's a black hole. Never will be filled. Not by another person, not by possessions. So, of course, these questions all come from our Israeli audience here, but we would also like to say hello to Peter and Jessica in Mexico. Hi, Peter and Jessica. And all of you who are watching this webcast, really welcome. So you can't ask questions, but I'm happy you can't ask questions, actually. I'm not dealing with this lot. Oh, that's a whole other question. They're asking about the inner sound. This is not a Buddhist question, actually, but in certain traditions, Hindu and Sikh traditions, there is something called the nada, which means the sound. And certain Buddhist practitioners, especially the excellent Thai forest monk Ajahn Sumedho and his group actually do practice this meditation on the inner sound. If you're very quiet, you can hear it. It's not the sound of the ears, it's an inner sound which is like a buzz. And then a kind of like a clear kind of, I wouldn't say a whistle, that isn't the word for it, but it's what? A hum, yes, it's a hum. And as one concentrates on it, it gets more and more. Now, what is interesting about this from a Buddhist point of view is that in I think the Surangama Sutra, but I could be wrong, but one Mahayana Sutra, all the Maha Bodhisattvas, the great Bodhisattvas, offer to the Buddha the meditation which they did in order to attain to their enlightenment. So one was on sight, one concentrated on various different topics that they used in order to gain their enlightenment. And Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig, said that he had meditated on the inner sound. And the Buddha applauds him, and in this sutra says that this is the supreme way of practice. So where that came from, I'm not sure, but it's there in this very famous sutra called the Sarangama Sutra, where all the bodhisattvas show what methods they use to attain to their enlightenment. Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara says that he meditated on the inner sound, and the Buddha commends him as the best way of doing it. So there are, of course, books on this. They're not Buddhist books, but this is a valid way which many Hindu schools and also certain traditions which have been studied by the Sikh masters in India, they concentrate on the inner sound and the inner light. And it is a way of focusing the mind. It's also a kind of shamatha. And Ajahn Sumedho and Ajahn Amaro and these Thai forest monks say that they found it very useful for also helping their mindfulness during the day, because this sound, as we concentrate on it, becomes louder and more constant, and is therefore a method of going inside and becoming more mindful even in daily life. Good. Well, none of this are, the reason I'm hesitating is that these questions are not really dealing with anything we're dealing with right now.
Can I ask a question?
If it's dealing with what we're dealing right now, yes.
But reducing the disturbing emotions, sometimes it happened that it happened to me several times that I was in disharmony with people. It was very, very strong. And it was so overwhelming that I had to step back. Maybe you can give us advice. When things like this happen, what can you do about it? Because it happened to me several times. It was really, really difficult, and I really lost. Sometimes I felt like I lost my
Equilibrium.
yeah, and then I had to get back, to go back to just slowly coming back.
So he's speaking about when we are seriously, some situations occur when we are seriously in disharmony with other people, where people really disturb us a lot, and one can feel, therefore, the very strong disturbing emotions arising, and then what to do. Yes? Well, I mean, as we will deal with later on here in the text when he deals with the paramitas, the whole question is that we cannot learn to be patient if we don't have someone who annoys us. And so we will deal with that subject more when we get to the paramita of patience. But it's very important to recognize that, because if people do annoy us and then we get all upset and we regard them as being an obstacle to our practice, we would be nice people if it wasn't for him. We don't recognize that actually he's really helping us a lot. Because first of all, he's showing us that we still have a ways to go. and also he is becoming the object for us to practice on. We'll deal with this more when we deal with patients. But it's a very important thing because, you know, this is something which we all have to deal with in our daily life. And it's a very skillful way of taking something which normally would seem to be an obstacle and making it into an opportunity for us to practice. This is part of the whole teachings on mind training on Lojong, which is that we do take everything which happens to us and use it as our path. And in that way we don't resent anything which happens, but that we just immediately think, now, how do I respond to this skillfully? It's actually very encouraging, because then everything that comes up and all the really obnoxious people we meet in this world are actually our gurus in disguise. And so, you know, you change your attitude, change the world.
But I think the wishing, what about the wishing to be a better person?
Well, exactly. This is what I mean about desire and wishing. There are good wishes and bad wishes, right? So, you know, here wishes and wants, he's talking about, you know, worldly desires. But of course, the desire and the wish, you know, to walk the path, the wish to cultivate good qualities, the wish that all beings should be happy, the wish for peace, the wish for all these altruistic wishes are good wishes. That's not what he's talking about, of course. Though that has a different word in Tibetan and in Sanskrit to the word. In English we use the same word, but in the classical languages it's a different word. And so the kind of wishes for, you know, a bigger house and more food and this in a greedy way. That's what he's talking about, greed. But the honest desire to cultivate the path and that all beings should be well and happy and peaceful and so forth, these open the heart, right? So that's a very different from our greed and grasping mind, which closes the heart. We can feel it inside us. Mm-hmm. Good question. Okay. The Buddha... she's asking about dependency. Because I'm talking that, you know, we should all be independent. We have to cultivate our own mind. We have to make our own choices and so forth. But she is pointing out that just as a small baby is very dependent on its parents, especially its mother, without whom it could not exist. And so we naturally have that sense of inner dependency. And even when we grow up, we tend to be dependent on others. So therefore, to address this. Yes? Yes. 1 minute. 1 minute. I'll do you next. Okay. Yes, so the Buddha called us, all us ordinary unenlightened beings, the childish. And therefore, another way of looking at the path is a process of growing up, of becoming adults, of maturing. You become mature and liberated. So, on one level, it's a matter of becoming more inwardly mature, you know, because outwardly we all grow up and get old, but inwardly we often stay infantile in our attitudes, in our emotional responses, and so forth. So it's a matter of inwardly maturing and growing up. At the same time, there is, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, the relationship with the teacher, which is especially at the beginning a relationship of dependence, because as with any skill, you need first to have someone, you have to depend on someone to teach you that skill. If you are a musician, if you're a sports person, or whatever skill you are trying to learn, in the beginning you need to rely on someone who is more expert than you in order to teach you how to do it. But nonetheless, even then, a good teacher is training their students to become more independent. A bad teacher is one who brings up his students to be endlessly dependent on him, because if he doesn't have students, he won't be a teacher. And one can see this happening. A good teacher is one who is training their students so that they can stand on their own feet. Even if they consult their teacher from time to time, they're not dependent on him for every decision. That, they are learning to grow up spiritually. And so, even though we all live in interdependence with each other, we couldn't even be here if it was not for the hard work and the organization and everybody, arranging things and cooking and helping us and whatever. We just being here right now is in dependence on so many other people. So, undoubtedly we live in a very, very interdependent universe. Every single thing which we have comes about through so many interconnecting causes and conditions and people who have made it all happen. Every single thing has been created by so many other causes and conditions and the people putting it together. So on one level we are always interdependent with everyone else. But inwardly, we should learn how to grow up and not be still like a little child. It's very important that we begin to that inwardly we become adults, because what happens otherwise is that outwardly we look very mature, inwardly we're still, keeping the same attitudes that we had as a small child, and we haven't gone beyond that. So that's what they mean by being independent, is that inwardly we grow up. Do you understand?
I think I understand. I don't agree, but I think I understand.
What don't you agree with? Good.
I think that dependency is emotional need and is a mental state that I'm not sure only child could be dependent. I think also as grown-ups, maybe it's even desired, to be dependent sometimes, because then we are more humble.
No, I think it shows you're emotionally needy. We are, as I say, on the one hand dependent, because we're dependent just, for everything, for our food, for our clothing, for our existence. We are in dependence on others. But when there is this emotional dependence, that I cannot be happy if it isn't for somebody else giving me what I think I need, then that is neediness. It's not at a very deep level. Of course, we are all more closely connected than we can possibly imagine. As apparently autonomous egos, this is what we are having to deal with, and this is where the sense of dependence or independence or interdependence comes from. But I think that we should relate to others out of love and appreciation and compassion and a sense of of appreciation, rather than out of a sense of need.
The need for recognition. As others as well, you as a monk, I'm sure you need maybe recognition from your teachers. I need recognition from my children as a good mother, from whatever.
Yes, but that's fine, and I mean it's good and it's human, but it's also ego. I mean, it's not just because it is our ego wants to be recognized as that we're doing it the right way. And of course, I mean, I am gratified when people say that something or other in all this endless yak is helpful. Then I'm glad, rather than people come and say, since your talk, I've completely lost the any interest in the Dharma. I mean, if enough people said that, I would be disheartened. It's true. But if I was if I was beyond the ego, then if I was speaking the truth, even if people didn't accept it, it wouldn't trouble me one way or the other. I mean, it's my ego that is relieved that, I didn't turn anybody off. And so likewise, of course you want your children to give you good feedback, that how you are treating them is helpful for them, and that they love you and that they appreciate you. I mean, but that's part of our human quality. It's not in itself. It's, what can I say? It's part of the relative reality in which we live. And it doesn't have anything per se to do with, with the path. We're not trying to train people to become dependent on other people's opinions. We are dependent on other people's opinions because we are just humans. But that is not what we're aiming for. Do you understand? We're not aiming to become dependent. We're aiming to become independent. We are dependent because we are just, ordinary human beings living with our little egos. But that isn't what we're aiming for. That's just the reality of the situation. Do you understand? I mean, we're not aiming to become more dependent. We're aiming also to realize our interdependence. But that's something different. Well, everything we do on everybody. Exactly. But at a very, very deep level, every single thing depends on others. Right? I mean, even if I just hold up this clock here, how did this clock come into being? Because of probably hundreds of different people, including the materials which made it, and the factory which made it, and the producers, and the designer in the beginning, and everything. I mean, probably hundreds, if not thousands of people are involved in just this one object. And the fact that it got here and eventually got onto a table, which likewise depends on how many people, plus the trees, plus the soil, plus the sun, plus the rain, plus everything, everything at a very deep level every single thing is dependent on something else. And that we normally don't think about. We only think about 1 or 2 or 3 people, and we think we're dependent on them. But actually, we're all very, very deeply interconnected the whole way through, the whole stratum, isn't it? But at the same time, inwardly, we are looking to become more responsible for our inner cultivation, not always dependent on other people's opinions and ideas, but from our own inner knowledge that this is right, this is good. Because often we are in a situation where society around us is saying no, and yet inwardly we are saying yes. We cannot always be relying on the opinion of others. We have to look for our own inner certainty, our own inner truth. So, as these can be dealt with later when we deal with this subject in Atisha. I would just like to say one thing. We have 4 minutes. I would like to tell you, especially all the ladies present, about an organization called Sakyadita. Sakyadita, Sakya comes from Sakya Muni, so it means the Buddha. Dita means a daughter, D-H-I-T-A. Sakyadita is this international organization for Buddhist women. And as far as I know, it's the only international organization for Buddhist women. And it meets every 2 years in different Buddhist countries. So, it's been in Cambodia and Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, Taiwan, Korea, Mongolia, Vietnam. And the next meeting will be in June, from June 23rd to the 30th, in Indonesia. You can't go to Indonesia? Oh, yeah, Muslim country, sorry. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You can still contact Sakyadita. Usually it's a Buddhist country. This time it's a Muslim country. That's true. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter. After that, we'll be back in a Buddhist country again. But you can look up Sakyadita. It has a website. And also there are many branches of it around the world in various Western and Asian countries. And it's a very nice organization because it's totally non-sectarian as far as Buddhism is concerned. There are nuns and lay women from all the Buddhist traditions, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, makes no difference. And they all come together just to discuss things which are of interest to Buddhist women. I mean, I myself have been to so many Buddhist conferences, and usually women are very much in the minority. Sometimes they're ignored altogether. Sometimes there can be 200 delegates and I'm the only woman. So the women are normally, really in the minority. Here is conferences which are only women. I mean, some men come too, of course, and men are very welcome. It's not a feminist organization. Huh? Yes, but this is totally focused on women. And women of not just one person talking, many women talking. Many women, there are, discussion groups, there are meditation groups in all the traditions. Not just here, which is dealing with the Tibetan tradition, but, or the Theravada tradition, the Mahayana tradition, Zen traditions, Tibetan tradition, all the traditions. And it's all the talks and the workshops and the meditations are just dealing with Buddhism from a female point of view. What is of interest for Buddhist women? And in the various countries then, of course, the majority of the participants are from that country, and they talk about how Buddhism is for women in that country. And it's really very, very interesting. And it has a very different energy to any other conference I ever went to. As I say, men are also very welcome. Many women bring their husbands. Often monks attend. You know, it's not in any way anti-anything. You know, least of all anti-male. So it's. Please don't think that it's a heavy feminist, you know, or us poor women what we suffered, even though we have. But it is. Please look it up. Yes, you see there are branches in the European countries, in America, Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan. There are branches all over. And it's just a chance for women to get together to talk about things which are of interest to women. And as I say, it's not anything, you know, anti-male. It's just that it's focused on Buddhism from the point of view of the female, for a change. Okay, so here it says Sakyadhita is spelled S-A-K-Y-A, Sakya, as in Sakyamuni. S-A-K-Y-A-D-H-I-T-A. Sakyadhita. Dita means daughter. So it means daughters of the Buddha. It has a blog and welcomes and needs contributions. If women here would like to submit their stories, they would be very welcome. So it has a web page, it has a blog, and it's just a very nice organization, really. Yeah, it's a good thing. So you keep yourself up posted. Every 2 years it meets in a different country. We're running out of Buddhist countries, this is true. Yeah, I'm president. But I didn't start it. This was started by other people. I only ended up being president because there was nobody else, and so they said, please be president. But I don't do the work. Other people are working for it. But I agreed to become president, partly because there was no one else, but also because I think it's a good thing.
So we offer to host the next meeting in 2 years. That means you'll come again in 2 years.
I don't know who is going to host the next one, because as I say, we're running out of Buddhist countries, and maybe we have to reschedule them again, do another round trip. But if it comes to a country which is not so far from you and does not have any restrictions for your visiting there, please consider it. I'm sure that, I mean, a number of women I know who went there the first time, they sort of went thinking, oh, it's going to be really flaky, you know, sort of new agey or feminist and whatever. And they were so surprised. It's nothing like that. And they just were so happy. And as a result, got much more involved in, and also trying to encourage their friends to come along. This really is a very unique conference, not like anything we've ever attended before, and very upbeat. When? Where? Near Borobudur, the great Buddhist stupa. And the other nice thing, I mean, I know you can't go for Indonesia, but the other nice thing is that after the conference, they usually have about 3 days of visiting whatever Buddhist sites there are that would be of interest. And so, you know, in every place we go to, they make arrangements, and the temples invite us, and every, you know, busloads of all these women going off on pilgrimage. And it's actually great fun. And it also is an opportunity to see the Buddhist places in these various places, including Indonesia, which of course used to be a very ancient Buddhist site. And so apart from Borobudur, which is the largest Buddhist stupa in the world, there are many other Buddhist sites also. And to give them credit, the Indonesians themselves are very proud of their Buddhist sites. And they're very conscious that they had been Buddhist before. So right now, they're not heavily fundamentalist. They're just, they're just Muslim. And so they appreciate their Buddhist history. They're not against the Buddhism. And they have been helping to get this whole thing organized, this conference of Buddhist women. I mean, they have been, the government and all the various officials and people who run the various places we need to go to have been most cooperative. So, but normally, as I say, it's in a Buddhist country, so then it's also much easier to organize. Okay, so please, well, I'll dedicate, you can dedicate at the end this afternoon. I will ask you later this afternoon for your question. Okay? You, yes, really. Sonandia Tanje Zibani Tonye Badana Banzene Jekana Jebala Tupai Sebisule Dua Dua Shua Jambaba Wojida Jembadan Kundu Zambode and Shinde Dida Kunji Jesudala Jing Kewa Dida Tanjira Tungo Chancho Sencho Rimbo Jema Jebanan Jeju Jewan Yambame Bayan Kone Gondo Bewa Shu